We've now come to our weekly segment, Korea Book Club, where we explore the world of Korean literature and books through works in Korean and in English translations. Joining me in the studio now is cultural essayist Colin Marshall, a host of the podcast Kolin의 한국 and author of the essay collection 한국 요약 금지. And he has another book for us to discover. Colin, hello. It's great to see you again.
Good to see you, Jang-ho.
Okay, so Colin, I see the book that you've brought for us today has a very familiar face on its cover. The face of quite possibly the most recognisable Korean in the world right now. And when I say Korean, I mean North Korean, of course.
Indeed, the most recognisable Korean, if not exactly the most beloved Korean. The face is that of Kim Jong Un, the current supreme leader of North Korea. And the book is 내 친구 Kim Jong Un, or My Friend Kim Jong Un, by the comic artist Keum Suk. She's known as Keum Suk Gendry-Kim in the West, and particularly in France, where she first moved in the mid-1990s to study sculpture. And it was there that she took up the work of translating Korean comics into French, an experience that eventually inspired her to become a manhwaga, or a comic artist, or a dessinatrice, I think, in French herself.
Right. So this book, first we should say, is a graphic novel then.
It is.
And then currently only available in Korean, right?
Right, just in Korean right now.
Right now, yes. So the author has quite an interesting background, as you mentioned. For many Korean comic artists, their career is the result of a long-held dream, but it seems to have happened quite differently for the author Kim.
Exactly, yes. You know, you could ask a lot of Korean kids today, what is your dream? And many will say, to be a comic artist. But in the case of Keum Suk, you could almost call her an accidental artist of comics, or rather of bande dessinée, since in some ways her work belongs less to the Korean tradition of comic art than to the French one. We could cite, for example, her tendency to work with non-fictional material, often drawn, as it were, directly, from her own life or the lives of her family members. And even when working at that small scale, you could say, she finds her way to larger observations about Korean history. And that could hardly be clearer than in her most acclaimed work to date, which is called Pul, or Grass in English, which she based on the life of one of the surviving comfort women from the Second World War.
Yes, Grass is a powerful work that we've reviewed on Korea Book Club in the past. Very powerful but harrowing as well, about a very challenging subject matter. But clearly, Kim Suk has little fear in approaching such sensitive material. Also, judging by the fact that right on the cover of this new book, we have Kim Jong Un, and she calls him a friend.
She does, yeah, that's true, although I should clarify, she doesn't mean it literally. She doesn't know Kim Jong Un, and in fact has never met Kim Jong Un. But in this book, she tells the story of attempting to get as close to knowing him as possible without actually going to North Korea. And she does this by reading a great deal of what's been written about him, of course, but also by interviewing a range of figures, few or no degrees of separation from him in the people who've interacted or knew or have known Kim Jong Un. Journalists, North Korea researchers, 탈북자, or refugees from North Korea, and even Moon Jae-in.
Right, do you mean the former president of South Korea himself?
The very same.
Wow, that is quite a coup then for a comic artist to land an appointment with a former president.
It's also one of the points in this book where I could feel Kim Suk's experience lining up with my own. Actually, I wouldn't call myself politically engagé, to borrow a word from her second homeland, but like her, I also made the trip once down to the countryside west of Ulsan, where Moon Jae-in now lives. He also runs a small bookstore near his house, and he spends a couple of hours each day there, shaking hands and taking pictures with visitors, anyone who comes, then holding court outside with anyone who wants to join him there. There's a cafe, of course, next to the bookstore, and he just talks about whatever anybody wants to talk about every weekday, I believe. So I met him, took the photo. I joked with him that it must be hard to do this sort of thing every day in, day out, but it's no doubt easier than being the president.
Wait, so you've actually met President Moon as well in this post-office life then?
Yes, indeed. My wife's mom is a big fan of his, so my wife wanted to take a picture and send it to her mom. And we were visiting Daegu, and it's not that far if you rent a car.
Sure.
So yeah, I shook his hand too, and it was fun to I've never met somebody who I've seen so often in the media, right? Everybody knows what Moon Jae-in looks like, but now he looks much more tanned because he's working outside.
Yes, he looks a bit more grizzled as well nowadays.
He's living a rural life, but he's holding up well, I think. I hope I look that good when I'm that age.
Sure, wow, okay, that's something quite special as well then.
True.
We'll perhaps have to ask you more about it another time.
Indeed.
But anyway, going back to the book, Kim Suk met the president as well then, you're saying?
Yes, she went to his house. She didn't get to see the bookstore, so I have that on her. The bookstore was closed that day. But she had an appointment with Moon Jae-in at his house, his sort of compound, and they get together and he tells her all about his much publicized stepping over the border into North Korea with Kim Jong Un. As you recall, they held hands, stepped over the line back in 2018.
Right. Well, I think she might have got a better deal almost, seeing President Moon at his home rather at the bookstore as well. But
That's
yes,
true.
So it seems they really got to talk about some big issues then, some big things with with her and the former president. The inter-Korean summits in 2018 you were mentioning there, they certainly raised a lot of hopes for improved North Korea-South Korea relations, hopes that have yet to be fulfilled, to say the least.
True. And Kim Suk records Moon Jae-in addressing those very disappointments in their conversation, giving his thoughts on the reasons behind them, what happened. And in fact, that deterioration of relations between North and South since inspired her to write this book in the first place. Its very first pages. They're set on the island of Ganghwa-do, where she now lives with her French husband and their dogs, and which is, as you know, practically as close as one can live to North Korea while still being in the South. It's so close that she often hears artillery drills being conducted on the other side of the border, which freaks out her dogs, of course, but disturbs the artist herself even more deeply. And she starts talking to her husband, saying, if war breaks out, you got to have your passport, you got to get yourself on the dogs on the first plane back to France. But the French husband, has a much more realistic view about what could actually be possible should that day arrive. He says, if they're bombing the South, they're going to bomb the airport first. We're not going to be able to do that. So he takes what actually we could call a more Korean position of just continuing to live life as usual as best they can. And that leaves Kim Suk, the artist, to process her anxieties through this work of comic art.
It's interesting. It does tend to surprise some foreign observers how little North Korea-related worry or fear South Koreans express at times. Does Kim Suk then find any reassurance in her conversations with all of these knowledgeable interviewees?
Yeah, it's a perennial sort of Western news article subject. Why aren't South Koreans running in the streets screaming about North Korea at all times? But that aside, by far this book's most memorable chapter for me is the one that depicts a meeting that she was perhaps uniquely well equipped to handle. The interviewee in this case is not a Korean, North or South, but a Frenchman who lived in Pyongyang in the late 1980s and early 90s, and there befriended Kim Jong-nam, whom listeners may remember as Kim Jong Un's older brother. The one-time heir apparent to Kim Jong-il, who was assassinated in Kuala Lumpur at the airport in 2017. And he comes off as a pretty mysterious figure, this Frenchman, which Kim Suk underscores by drawing him with a blank face, no features. But he also offers a variety of pointed observations about life in both North and South Korea. So despite having lived on this side of the border now for quite some time, he tells of still being frequently checked up on by government agents, southern government agents, much as relocated North Koreans are. And as he puts it, living here is a choice between either feeling constant anxiety or ignoring the geopolitical situation and just getting on with life. And that, since we all have to survive, the latter is better, in his opinion.
That is fascinating. You've mentioned that the author also spoke with actual North Koreans who have made the move south, who have defected, have come to South Korea. What did they say? What's their perspective on everything related to North Korea and Kim Jong Un and whatnot?
I find that any journalist or researcher who regularly talks to North Koreans, they remark on the same qualities among North Koreans, that they absolutely refuse to address some subjects, and that they address all the rest with a brusque directness. So Kim Suk meets up with one middle-aged woman from North Korea, whose personality very much fits that description. And when she doesn't refuse to answer questions, she turns out to have a lot to say about the strategies for survival employed in the North, some of which might be shocking to foreign readers, and even the promise that she and many of her compatriots felt that Kim Jong Un would be more of a reformer than his father. But he may be accorded a godlike stature in North Korea. Even so, within the North Korean system, as she puts it, even a god is not all-powerful. Everybody in that system is in the same boat, as she puts it.
It all sounds quite remarkable, but also does sound like it would have been something in a non-fiction book rather than a graphic novel. I think that medium is really interesting. How do you think that contributes to this subject that we're talking about? How would you describe the illustrations and the art as well, and how that accompanies what she's trying to say?
It's a large format book. We haven't mentioned that. It's not a small manhwa-check. And so she can spread out on this canvas, and there are 2 or 3 colors she uses to good effect as well. But what I think comes across most is you feel like you're doing this investigation with her. You're meeting these people alongside her, because she's drawing subjectively. Like I say, the Frenchman has no face. And other details like this, what she's thinking about bleeds into the images of what she's actually doing, where she's going. She draws realistically, but there's this touch of subjectivity, of entering her own mind in this investigation. You sort of start to feel her anxiety, but you also share the experience of meeting these people, some of whom they could be in danger of even speaking, and just you're feeling like you're along with the investigation for her. You're along with her for the investigation. This is not a feeling you get from a standard nonfiction text-only book, I would say.
Sure, and some of the illustrations, they are really quite beautiful as well, it seems. And finally, let's go back to the title, My Friend Kim Jong Un. Will a reader come away from the book, My Friend Kim Jong Un, feeling as if they know more about the man at the helm of North Korea better than they went in, perhaps?
Among Kim Suk's cited sources is a book called The Great Successor, The Perfectly Divine Destiny of Brilliant Comrade Kim Jong Un, by the New Zealand journalist Anna Fifield. And I enjoyed reading that book when it came out back in 2019, I think it was. But I also felt that Fifield had left her major subject on the table, so to speak. In her introduction, she writes of developing this overwhelming fascination with Kim Jong Un after he descended to power, and how compelled she felt to set out to learn everything there was to know about him. And her book hits all the points you'd expect. The Swiss boarding school, the obsession with basketball culminating in a friendship with Dennis Rodman, the execution he ordered of his uncle, Jang Song-taek, all these points. But it never really investigates the origin or nature of her own obsession, the obsession itself. And maybe owing to its unconventional form, or maybe owing to Kim Suk's long professional engagement with history as it manifests in her life and lives connected to hers, 내 친구 Kim Jong Un has the kind of self-reflectiveness not usually exercised by writers who take on North Korea. The themes in play here are larger than any leader, no matter how ostensibly supreme.
Right, and as we said, it is currently only available in Korean, but I would not be surprised if there is an English or French or any other version coming out soon, especially as she is also celebrated globally already as well with her previous work, such as Grass. Once again, it's called 내 친구 Kim Jong Un by Keum Suk or Keum Suk Gendry-Kim, and that was our pick for Korea Book Club this week. Colin, thank you for that recommendation and review. We'll catch up with you again soon. Take care.
Thanks very much, Sang-ho.
And that's where we wrap up our show for today. Thank you for staying with us. We'll be back same time tomorrow, so we hope you can join us again then. Till then, we hope you have a great day. I've been your host, Kwon Jang-ho, and thank you as always for listening. Goodbye.